Warning: this video will bring up uncomfortable topics such as grooming, sexualization of idols, racism, etc. If you do not feel comfortable in sticking around, please skip this video and I hope to see you in the next one. Hello my beautiful people. It's been a hot minute since I've done a video for the Is K-pop That Deep series, but here I go. Today we'll be talking about babying idols, how we do it, where it came from, and what we can do to stop it. This topic is pretty dear to me as I have not only experienced this before in real life, but my ultimate bias, Jungkook, is quite literally in every single example when people discuss this topic. This video goes out to Perna, who suggested for me to do this topic. Congrats on getting your doctorate, bestie! So babying idols, or infantilization of idols, have existed since the beginning of time. We have wooed all kinds of people, including celebrities, politicians, supervillains, mass murderers. Yes, we've seen it all. For context, I'll give you a definition of infantilization. According to the Oxford Dictionary, infantilization is to treat someone as a child or in a way which denies their maturity in age or experience. Here's the real life experience I had. So I look a lot younger than I am thanks to the genetics game my parents played. I had started working at a car dealership, and for those who have never done sales, it is not for the faint of heart. There was a coworker of mine in the beginning who would speak to me in the most infantilizing way, like I didn't know anything about the world. He would repeat the questions back to me and talk slowly, things that would piss me the hell off. It turned out he was actually younger than me by a year or two as we got to know each other. He was pretty shocked to find out, as most do, and apologized for treating me like I was a kid. I've actually had these experiences all throughout my 20s, some hilarious, some seriously gross, the latter we're gonna get into today. Before we dive into some examples, I wanted to touch briefly on the history of infantilizing K-pop idols, or particularly infantilizing Asian people. This kind of level of Orientalism has existed for hundreds of years now, thanks to the West seeing Asians as a less socially developed race. This kind of othering is what causes Westerners to view Asians as not knowing much about the world, having to need their white counterparts to show them what culture is. This level of racist parenting just adds layers if you're a white K-pop fan, don't you think? Western society also tends to see Asian women in particular as younger than they actually are because they're meant to be seen as docile, obedient, and kind. These attributes are also viewed in Asian men too, because back then, Chinese immigrants wore their hair longer. For the ignorant Westerners back then, they thought it's because they're more feminine, not because it's literally their tradition to do so. Soon it developed that Asian men are more feminine than they actually are because they seem to not have that rugged individualism that white men have, or even worse, the hyper-masculine attributes that are related to black men. There's also some techno-orientalism too that's more present in the present day, where Westerners view Asians as this race that's technologically advanced but not so much socially. I'm thinking of doing a video on this in the near future, but it's probably going to be an hour-long one because it's heavily studied, and I don't see it showcased that often in relation to K-pop besides a video essay or two. Anyways, what about K-pop idols? Surely K-pop idols are created to be role models for the Korean youth, which makes them the way they are with dating bans, no visible signs of doing illegal drugs like alcohol and smoking, and just being an overall upright citizen. This, paired with our Orientalistic views of Asian people, is what causes the infantilization of K-pop idols. This is a very simple way of looking at things because there's still so many layers, like the model minority myth being involved, seeing these people as pure and virginal. But the reason why these are so tied together is also because of the US's influence on the East through colonization and occupation, something that is a lot to cover too. If you guys are interested in how the US has a role in K-pop and how seeking Western validation has its layers, please let me know in the comments. Another layer adding on top of this is the fact that companies tend to parentify everything from themselves, their managers, their group leaders, and the fans. By definition, parentification occurs when a child is regularly expected to provide emotional or practical support for a parent rather than getting it themselves. In the K-pop system, Most of these idols tend to train when they're literally in their early teens or late teens, or in some very rare cases, even from elementary school. They're away from their parents that could provide this kind of support, and the way they get their support is quite literally everybody else. This could be dangerous because there's no boundary setting, leading these idols to have some issues with emotional regulation and the like. Now, I'm not saying that these idols are all traumatized or have been through some level of abuse, because I'm not in any place to say that. But the level of stress that leaders or other adults and even their parents can have to not hinder their development must be so high. It's a part of the process of being an idol, I feel, which is why it's super important for these idols to get third-party counseling, like literally a therapist that specializes in idols with no attachment to the company kind of thing. I can't emphasize how terrible of an idea a company providing health services themselves is, as somebody who values their privacy and doesn't want to see their coworker or boss in the same therapy office. Almost been there before, lol. So this part is pretty important. Anyways, what I'm trying to say is that companies do not and will not have the idols in their absolute best interest, because their bottom line is going to be how much money they bring to theirs and the shareholders' pockets. Not to get too pro-labor here, but you should never stand a company because a company is not your damn friend. To go even deeper, this is what Sobi said about youth and idols. When K-pop fans are presented with seemingly flawless men and women who are symbols of youth, it feeds into this desire. Creating this fantasy world with youth is endless and beauty reigns supreme, a world where we can escape the reality of imperfection. K-pop fans at a domestic and international level are guilty into buying the superficiality of K-pop, abetting the facade, and only making matters worse for the idols. It becomes this endless cycle in which we get new younger idols given unrealistic standards that they have to adhere to, and we continue to prop them up as these untouchable idols. It's an awful system, really, and until we begin to humanize these people, we will never escape from it. Now that I have tried to break infantilization down, here are some examples. I'm going to divide this up into two different categories: the sexualization of infantilized idols, and then coddling idols from being criticized. This category sickens me the most because it's so obviously gross, but I feel like a lot of maknaes in each group go through the same exact thing when they debuted a 15 or 16-year-old and end up being the baby all their lives. A very famous example that I'm definitely going to bring up is my boy Jungkook of BTS. I mentioned this in my Jungkook video, but there are many fans, and I mean a lot of older armies, who was sexualized Jungkook in the Dope video when he was like 17. I remember there were essays about not seeing him as a sexy guy because he was a minor, and there were people arguing back. It was just so gross. Fast forward to 2019, he was caught with tattoos, longer hair, and a potential girlfriend, and then the exact same people started to worry about him, saying that he's lost his way and that he needs to get back on track. Like, how? Why? Even he apologized on Bon Voyage 4.
일단 제일 처음에는 먼저 미안하다는 말, 죄송하다는 말을 하고 해야 될 것 같아요. 아직까지 그게 마음에 걸려서 뭔가 내가 솔직히 촬영 내내 내가 여기서 더 웃고 더 장난치고 해도 될까 라는 생각을 좀 많이 했던 것 같아요. 실망시켜드리지 않겠다고 먼저 얘기를 해드리고 싶고.
This pissed me off because obviously Jungkook was trying to figure himself out as a person like any other young adult would, but the finger-wagging police would get on his ass and demand him to change back to the old ways, particularly when it came to who he was dating. These were the same people who exaggerated that Jungkook was scared of women and would laugh whenever he gets super nervous, and chalked up as someone who would never talk to women. Like, clearly Jungkook is a young adult who would do regular adult things, whether we like to admit it or not. It's weird that in 2023, Jungkook is almost 26 and it still gets baby like wild. Every time he goes on live at an ungodly hour, he would be told to go to sleep or be chastised for having too many piercings, too many tattoos, or even cursing or drinking. Now, Jungkook gets pretty irritated at the baby comments and would emphasize that he is 26 now.
자기 전에 애기 작게요 해주세요. 저는 얘기가 아니에요. 전 지금 26살이고 네. 아, 왜 술 그만 먹으래요? 나 다 큰 성인이고 지금 나이가 응? 27인데 조금이라도 젊을 때 응? 즐기는 거지. 인생 한 번뿐인데.
In fact, what makes it really amazing is that Jungkook decided to debut a song where he talks about having relations 7 days a week, which is so empowering for him, I'm sure. After spending a decade being seen as a kid who didn't know anything about sex, he's old enough to be able to depart away from that image. And guess who's pissed off about that? Yup, the older fans who sexualized Jungkook in the first place. It's great that these days Jungkook could care less about how he's viewed now, because what can he do?
앞으로도 이렇게 편안하게 아미들한테 할 얘기 못 할 얘기 나중에 그냥 다 하면서 그냥 진짜 서로 진짜 나중에는 서로 욕할 수도 있어 진짜. 욕하면서 야, 씨, 오늘 왜 그랬냐? 오늘 라이브 왜 이렇게 망쳤냐? 뭐 나도 그럴 수 있는 거 아니냐? 나도 사람인데, 응? 그런 관계를 바라지 않나? 모르겠다. 그냥 자연스럽고 싶어. 그냥 아미들한테만큼은 너무 재밌어.
Obviously, to this day, the fandom still very much coddles him and it shows. I am guilty of this as much as any other Jungkook stan, but at least we're all admitting that we're a bit protective rather than living in denial. Another example is IU, who coincidentally is Jungkook's favorite idol. People always ship them together without realizing their upbringings are quite similar. I also remember when she was accused of pulling some Lolita concepts when she was doing her promotions for Chatshire, a conceptual album in which she details her experience of being sexualized as a younger idol and her complicated feelings about it. The song is JJ, in which it follows a 5-year-old who's a mischievous little kid who climbs up this tree when she's not supposed to, and the way that IU describes it is considered to be pedophilic. Also, the artwork on the album shows a kid wearing fishnets behind his shorts. Now, in her defense, I believe the song is a metaphor on how older men viewed her when she was younger, and I find it kind of funny that people would accuse her of being pedophilic when her fan base back then used to prey on her when she came into the industry at 15. She is seen as the nation's little sister for so long that she gets overprotected as well, to the point where her dating scandals affect the men she's dated more than herself. Of course, IU did end up apologizing for these concepts, but the songs and concepts speak for themselves. IU is known for being autobiographical, and I think Chatshire is her magnum opus when it comes to encapsulating her the best at that age. She began to fight back after years and years of being infantilized, and I think it's pretty amazing. 23 still remains to be my favorite track from her, and it really captures my year being 23 when I realized I was being sexualized as a kid as well. If you guys want to check it out, I'll link the album via Spotify down below. Coddling idols when they fuck up is the most common way we infantilize idols. Here, I'll provide some more examples. Chaeyoung has to be the most recent example in terms of fuck-ups. She was out here wearing a some Nazi shirt a few times and a QAnon shirt when she was in the US, if I remember correctly. After being caught with it, a lot of her fans came to her defense and said that she didn't know any better, despite the fact that Japan occupied Korea for a good portion of the 20th century and was one of the Axis powers. By saying that she didn't know her own history is even more embarrassing than the actual fuck-up, it calls to question how much do these idols know about their history or lack thereof. The most extreme example has got to be the people who stand by Seungri. As someone who is a former VIP, I feel compelled to do a separate video on Seungri himself, but he also was babied as the youngest member of Big Bang for over 10 years on top of being the least talented in the group. And so when the Burning Sun scandal broke, a lot of his fans started saying that he wasn't deeply involved, which is arguably true, like he wasn't the mastermind behind everything, but it was definitely enough involvement to where he got prison time. The babying comes from years of being bullied and harassed by other fans, and even the group themselves, as they use Seungri as a punching bag for everything. As a result, the guy ended up being really involved with some seedy people, and while he's a piece of shit, the infantilization goes so far in which there are fans who create whole websites and pages to prove his innocence. Like legit QAnon conspiracy shit. I wish I was joking. This is so dangerous because there are quite a few indirect victims involved in his crimes, such as the prostitutes he solicited for sex for his businesses, and his fandom continues to protest for his innocence. Like, if you tried to say anything about Seungri now, you would end up getting mass quoted by its fans and seeing that same old thread that has been seen a bajillion times, and it's like a whole cult, I'm pretty sure. So Katie, what the hell do you want us to do? Well, treat them as they are, adults. These idols, whether you like to admit it or not, are people who are flawed and will have opinions that will be problematic. Well, yes, they are a product of their environment. Korea is also rapidly changing and catching up, which means K-pop idols can do the same thing as well. Especially if they plan to promote overseas, they have to be more culturally sensitive, meaning that, and this is controversial, but I think that education should be prioritized when they're training. I don't think it's a great idea to have idols drop out of school in order to debut or not go to college because they have a successful career. I think these should be mandatory, not just because it's a great backup plan, but also gives them the worldview that most people have and stay in the loop. Idols should be able to grow and experience new things, which means that we should let idols be free to do whatever they please within certain ramifications, of course. If they are 20-something, they should be able to drink, smoke, and date openly as long as they're not hurting themselves or anybody. They should also have therapists, like I mentioned earlier, to talk about their lives and just be able to live, man. Young adulthood is the perfect time to figure out who you are as a person, and as it gives room to grow as a human being, and taking that away from idols is just stunting their growth. Likewise, we should also hold our idols accountable for their actions when they fuck up, rather than sweeping it under the rug or gaslighting people thinking that they're perfect. Yes, it's painful to see our faves get dragged through hell and back, but there are ways to educate an idol to apologize and learn from their mistakes. CL, someone who used to culturally appropriate back then when she was in YG, can be aware of how K-pop is derived from black music years later and support Black Lives Matter. Many others can change and learn more about such things. This is not an option because they should support everyone who's a fan of theirs. K-pop fandom is pretty diverse and inclusive for a reason, and it should stay that way. Anyways, thank you for watching this video. Feel free to converse amongst yourselves on a fuck up an idol did and what you wish would have happened instead, or maybe stories of what you've experienced as a marginalized fan. I hope to see you guys soon with another topic. See ya!